"Make sure the house is clean this weekend, Martha," he had said, that smirk playing in the corner of his mouth. "Try to make the place look decent for once. Maybe clean up your mess in the den." I stood there in my kitchen that Friday morning, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My mess. He called it my mess. The den that still smelled faintly of Frank's pipe tobacco. The room where my late husband spent 40 years of evenings reading by lamplight. The space where our life together had unfolded in quiet, beautiful moments. Laura, my daughter, hadn't even looked at me. She just nodded along with whatever Eric said, like she always did now. Like I'd become invisible in my own home. When the front door finally closed behind them, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The silence wrapped around me, heavy and suffocating. I turned to start the dishes, and that's when I saw it. On the kitchen counter, partially hidden under yesterday's newspaper, lay a manila folder with a tab that made my heart stop. Property listing agreement. My hands trembled as I pulled it closer and opened it. There, on the signature line, was my name in the flowing script. Martha Ellison. But I had never signed this document. Please tell me something in the comments section. Where are you watching this story from? And take a moment to subscribe to the channel, because every day there's a real story that will shake your heart. The papers blurred as hot tears filled my eyes. I blinked them away furiously, forcing myself to focus on every word. This was a listing agreement to sell my house. The house Frank built with his own hands 42 years ago. The house where we raised Laura. The house where every floorboard held a memory. And there was my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was close, eerily close, but the curve of the M was wrong. The loop in the is too perfect. Someone had forged my name. I sank into the kitchen chair, the one with the wobbly leg Frank always meant to fix but never got around to. My name is Martha Ellison. I'm 77 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought this house was still mine. I thought the roof over my head was secure. I thought my daughter loved me enough to protect what her father left behind. But this signature told a different story. This careful forgery told me everything I needed to know about Eric's weekend plans, and why he wanted the house so clean. He was selling it. Right out from under me. My chest tightened, but not with panic. With something harder. Something that had been building for months, maybe years, since the day they moved in and started erasing Frank from his own home. I picked up my phone with shaking hands. Laura answered on the fourth ring, her voice distracted with road noise in the background. "Mom, we're almost at the resort. What's wrong?" "Laura, there's a real estate listing agreement here on the counter, with my signature on it. But I never signed anything to sell this house." There was a pause, then a long sigh that made my stomach drop. "Mom, you're overreacting again. Eric's just helping organize the paperwork. You know how confused you get sometimes about what you've signed." "I'm not confused. I would remember agreeing to sell my home. We'll talk about it when we get back on Sunday. Just enjoy your weekend, okay? Maybe clean up a little like Eric asked. The house has gotten messy lately." Her words hit me like a slap. When did my daughter start talking to me like I was a problem to manage? "Laura, I need you to listen." "Mom, I really can't do this right now. We're on vacation. Please just try to relax." The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling my chest tighten with a pain that had nothing to do with my heart. Even Laura was on his side now. My own daughter believed I was confused, forgetful, that I couldn't be trusted to remember my own decisions. Maybe that's exactly what they'd been counting on. I looked around at the walls of my kitchen with new eyes. The cream paint Frank had chosen because I said it reminded me of vanilla ice cream. The window over the sink where I'd watched cardinals build their nest every spring for 38 years. The small crack in the corner tile where Laura had dropped a can of soup when she was 12, and we'd laughed so hard we cried. I won't let him erase me, I whispered to the empty room. I won't let him erase us. I stood up, folder still in hand, and walked slowly through the house. Each room felt different now, like I was seeing it through a stranger's eyes. In the living room, I noticed more changes than I'd let myself acknowledge before. Frank's favorite reading chair was gone, replaced months ago with a sleek leather couch I never chose. His brass lamp had disappeared. Even the photos on the mantel had been rearranged, pushed to the sides, made smaller and less important. On the side table sat an envelope I'd never seen before. It was addressed to Eric Dalton. Not to me. Not to Mr. and Mrs. just Eric. My hands shook as I picked it up. It had already been opened, so I pulled out the contents. An appraisal report from Anderson Property Assessments, dated 2 weeks ago. My house was worth $475,000. Eric had already had my house professionally appraised. Without telling me. Without asking permission. Like it was already his. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Frank for 47 years and stared at the ceiling, remembering the day everything changed. It was 3 months after Frank's funeral. I'd been so lost in grief, wandering through the house like a ghost myself. When Laura suggested she and Eric move in temporarily, just to help out, I'd been grateful. Desperate even. The silence had been crushing me. Eric had smiled that bright salesman smile of his when they arrived with their suitcases. We'll take care of you, Martha. It's what family does. You shouldn't be alone in this big house. At first, it seemed like a blessing. Laura was there to cook breakfast with me, to sit on the porch in the evenings. Eric fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom, replaced some old switches, and mowed the lawn. They were helpful, attentive. But then came the changes. Small at first, so small I thought I was imagining things. Frank's chair disappeared one day while I was at the grocery store. It was falling apart, Mom, Laura had said. We got you something more comfortable. But it wasn't any more comfortable. It was less Frank's. Less ours. His reading lamp vanished next. Then his pipe collection from the den. Then the quilt his mother made us, replaced with throw pillows I'd never seen before. We're just updating things, Laura kept saying. Making it more modern. More comfortable. But it wasn't any more comfortable. It was less mine. I remembered something else too. Something that had woken me up one night about 6 weeks ago. I'd gotten up for water, my throat dry, and heard voices drifting from their bedroom. Eric's voice, low but clear through the thin walls. Once she's in a home, the place is ours to flip. The neighborhood's hot right now, Martha. We could clear 300,000 easy, maybe more. Then we're set. California, here we come. Laura's response had been too quiet to hear, but I'd waited in the dark hallway, my heart pounding. She hadn't disagreed. She hadn't defended me. She just murmured something I couldn't make out, and then their light went off. I'd stood there in the darkness for a long time, telling myself I'd misheard, that I was being paranoid, that my daughter would never do that to me. But now, holding this forged listing agreement, I knew the truth. I hadn't misheard anything. I got up and went to Frank's den, the room Eric had called my mess. I sat in the wooden chair at Frank's old desk and picked up the photo of him I kept there. His kind eyes stared back at me, that gentle smile I'd loved for 50 years. You built this house with your hands, I whispered. Every nail, every board, every window frame. They think I'll just fade away. They think I'm too old, too confused, too weak to fight back. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and straightened my spine. Not yet, I said firmly. I'm not done yet. I walked down to the basement, my knees protesting the steep stairs. Behind the old water heater, in the corner Frank always said was the safest spot in the house. He'd installed a small safe back in 1985. Only the two of us knew the combination. It was where we kept the important papers, the ones that really mattered. My fingers worked the dial slowly, carefully. July 23, 47. Our wedding date. July 23, 1947. 50 years ago this summer. The lock clicked. The heavy door swung open. Inside, beneath our marriage certificate and Frank's discharge papers from the Navy, beneath Laura's birth certificate, and the title to Frank's truck that I'd sold years ago, lay the original deed to our house. I pulled it out with trembling hands and read the name on the title in Frank's careful handwriting. Martha Louise Ellison. Sole owner. Not Mr. and Mrs. Frank Ellison. Not joint ownership. When Frank built this house, he'd put it in my name alone. So you'll always have security, he'd told me. So you'll always have a home no matter what. He'd protected me even then, decades ago, never imagining I'd need this protection from our own daughter's husband. I held the deed to my chest and felt something shift inside me. Fear transformed into determination. Grief hardened into resolve. Eric thought I was a confused old woman. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Monday morning, I dressed carefully in my navy blue church dress and the pearl earrings Frank gave me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look competent, clear-minded. Not like the confused old woman Eric was telling everyone I'd become. I called Mr. Holden, our family lawyer. His secretary said he had an opening that afternoon. I took it. His office was downtown, in the old brick building that had been there since before I was born. It smelled like leather and old books and lemon furniture polish. Mr. Holden stood when I entered, his kind eyes crinkling with concern behind his glasses. Martha, it's good to see you, though I wish it were under happier circumstances. Your voice sounded upset on the phone. What's troubling you? I placed the listing agreement and the deed on his mahogany desk, side by side. I need you to tell me what's happening here. And I need you to tell me the truth. He put on his reading glasses and studied both documents for a long time. The silence stretched out. I watched his face change as he read, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. When he finally looked up, his jaw was tight. Mrs. Ellison, according to this deed, you are the sole legal owner of your property. Your husband's will, which I handled, confirmed this property passes entirely to you. This signature on the listing agreement. He tapped the forged name with his finger. This isn't your signature, is it? No, sir. It's not. Mr. Holden leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. Then what we have here is attempted fraud. Possibly multiple felonies, depending on how far your son-in-law has taken this. Forgery, fraud, perhaps even elder abuse under state law. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Fraud. Felonies. Elder abuse. What can I do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. What are my options? He was quiet for a moment, thinking. You have two paths, Martha. The first is immediate. We file a police report today. Stop this in its tracks, and let the criminal justice system handle Eric. And the second path. His eyes met mine, and I saw something that surprised me. A hint of steel that matched what I was feeling. The second path is more strategic. We let him continue. We document everything. We give him enough rope to hang himself completely. Then when we act, there's no question of his intent, no room for him to claim it was a misunderstanding. You want me to let him think he's getting away with it? I want to make sure that when this comes to light, there's no possible way he can manipulate the situation or blame it on your confusion. I want him caught red-handed with no way out. I thought about Eric's smirk, about Laura's dismissive voice on the phone. About the $300,000 they were planning to pocket from selling my home. How long would I have to wait? Not long. A week, maybe 2. Just until we have everything documented. I nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. I went home that afternoon and did something I hadn't done in months. I played the part they expected of me. I became a helpless widow. The forgetful old woman they'd been telling everyone I was. When Eric came home from work, I apologized for forgetting to take out the trash. I pretended to search for my reading glasses that were sitting on top of my head. I asked him what day of the week it was, even though I knew perfectly well it was Monday. He exchanged glances with Laura across the dinner table, and I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. "See, honey," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "This is exactly what I was talking about. She's declining faster than we thought. We're doing the right thing." Laura looked uncomfortable but nodded. "Maybe we should make an appointment with her doctor." "Good idea," Eric said, cutting his chicken. "We need documentation of her condition anyway. For when we have to make the hard decisions." But while he talked, while he planned my future in a nursing home, I was recording everything. Mr. Holden had given me a small digital recorder that looked like a pen. It sat in my shirt pocket, capturing every word. I also started photographing documents. Every paper Eric left lying around. Every note in his handwriting. Every piece of mail that came addressed to him about my house. I was building a case brick by brick. 3 days later, I saw them. 2 men in a van parked outside my house, clipboards in hand. I watched from behind the living room curtain as Eric greeted them on the front lawn, shaking hands and laughing like old friends. They walked around the property measuring, taking photos, making notes. Eric pointed out features of the house, gesturing proudly like he owned it. Like Frank hadn't spent every weekend for 2 years building it from the ground up. Like I didn't exist. After they left, I found furniture measurements on the dining room table. They were planning how to stage my home for sale, calculating the best arrangement to make it look bigger, more modern, more valuable. My home. Not theirs. Mine. I took photos of everything and emailed them to Mr. Holden. His response came quickly. "Perfect. Keep documenting. We're almost there." That evening at dinner, Eric was especially cheerful. "So Martha, Laura and I were thinking, maybe this weekend you could stay with your sister up in Riverside. Give us a chance to do some deep cleaning, maybe paint a few rooms. Spruce the place up." "But Carol's in Florida until May," I said quietly. He blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, right. Well, maybe a friend then. Or I could book you a nice hotel for the weekend. My treat." He wanted me gone, out of the house, so he could prepare it for sale without me watching. "That's very kind," I said, playing my part. "A hotel might be nice." His smile returned. "Great. I'll take care of it." The next day, I drove to Sunshine Storage on the edge of town. A young man named Carl greeted me at the front desk with a friendly smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "I need to rent a storage unit," I told him. "Something medium-sized. I'm downsizing, getting rid of some things." His face softened with sympathy. "Of course. We have several units available. Let me show you what we've got." He set me up with Unit 23, a 10 by 15 space that would hold everything I needed. I paid cash for 3 months in advance, not wanting any paper trail that Eric might find. "Do you need help moving things?" Carl asked. "I'm here most afternoons if you need a hand." "That would be wonderful, thank you." Over the next week, I made trips to Sunshine Storage every afternoon while Eric was at work and Laura was at her part-time job at the library. I was careful, methodical. I only took things they wouldn't notice right away. My photo albums. Frank's tools from the garage, my grandmother's china that had been boxed up in the attic, the quilts I'd made over the years, my wedding dress in its preservation box, the Christmas ornaments with Laura's baby handprints, all the things that mattered, all the pieces of my life that Eric planned to throw away or sell. Carl helped me carry boxes each time, chatting about his classes at community college and his girlfriend. On my fourth visit, he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "You know, it's funny," he said, setting down a box of books. "Your son-in-law rents a unit here too. Same last name. Unit 47. I froze, my hand on a box. "Eric Dalton? He has a storage unit here?" "Yeah, comes in about once a week, usually late afternoon on Fridays. Nice guy." That night, I couldn't sleep. Why would Eric need a storage unit? What was he keeping there? The questions circled in my mind like vultures. The next Friday, I went back to Sunshine Storage. I wore a hat and sunglasses, feeling ridiculous but determined. I told Carl I needed to reorganize some boxes, and might be there a while. Then I walked slowly past Unit 47, as if heading to my own unit further down the row. The door wasn't quite closed. There was a gap of maybe 2 inches, probably from when Eric had been there last. I glanced around. The facility was quiet in the afternoon heat. Most people were at work. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't. But my hand moved anyway, my fingers curling around the edge of the door, pulling it just wide enough to see inside. What I saw made my knees buckle. My china cabinet. The one Frank bought me for our 25th anniversary, with the curved glass doors and the cherrywood finish. My mother's rocking chair, the one she'd nursed me in as a baby. Frank's toolbox, the red metal one he'd carried to every job site. My quilts, the ones I'd made for Laura when she was born, carefully folded in plastic bins. My wedding photo in its silver frame. The landscape painting Frank and I bought on our honeymoon. The antique clock from my parents' house. Everything. He'd been systematically stealing my life, piece by piece, and storing it here. Probably planning to sell it all once he got me out of the house and into a nursing home. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold my phone steady as I took photos. I documented everything from every angle. Every stolen item. Every piece of my life that Eric had taken. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. I just kept photographing, kept building my case, kept gathering evidence of betrayal so deep it took my breath away. "You just cleaned your own grave, Eric," I whispered. I drove straight to Mr. Holden's office. I didn't call ahead. I just walked in, and his secretary took one look at my face and ushered me right through. "Martha? What happened?" I showed him the photos. All of them. Every single image of my stolen possessions in Eric's storage unit. He looked at each one carefully, his expression growing darker with every swipe. "This is it," he said finally. "This is what we need. This proves intent. This proves premeditation." The home health nurse appeared at my front door exactly 2 weeks later, clipboard in my hand and a professional smile on her face. Evan had arranged it, she explained, expressing concerns about my declining health and need for regular monitoring. Her name was Patricia Freeman, a kind-looking woman in her 50s with warm brown eyes and the capable hands of someone who'd spent decades caring for others. She came 3 times each week, ostensibly to check my blood pressure, ensure I was taking medications properly, and help with light household tasks. But I noticed how she took extensive notes after each visit, writing detailed observations in a leather-bound journal she carried everywhere. One evening, as she was preparing to leave, I decided to ask her directly about it. Patricia hesitated at my front door, clearly wrestling with professional ethics and personal conscience. Finally, she spoke quietly. "Mrs. Clark, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your son-in-law specifically asked me to document any signs of confusion, memory problems, or cognitive decline. For legal purposes, he said. To help protect you. My hands trembled slightly, though not with fear. With pure cold fury. Did he specify what kind of legal purposes? He mentioned something about competency evaluations and ensuring you receive proper care. Patricia met my eyes directly. But I want you to know, I told him I haven't observed any such issues whatsoever. You're mentally sharper than most people half your age, Mrs. Clark. He seemed quite disappointed by my assessment. I looked at this woman who'd been hired specifically to provide ammunition against me, to build a case for my incompetence. Thank you for telling me the truth, Patricia. I'm a nurse, not a spy, she said firmly, squaring her shoulders. My loyalty is to my patients and their well-being, not to whoever happens to be paying my invoice. After she left, I carefully added her testimony to my growing file of evidence, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. I began deliberately playing the role Evan expected of me. I moved slower around the house, spoke more hesitantly in conversations, let sentences trail off mid-thought as if I'd forgotten what I was trying to say. It felt like betraying my own mind, but Thomas had specifically advised this approach. Let him think he's winning, Thomas had counseled. Overconfident people make careless mistakes. They stop being careful. So I played confused when Evan visited, nodding vaguely when he discussed elaborate plans for my care and future living arrangements. I pretended not to notice when Laura slipped documents in front of me to sign, though I read every single word carefully before politely declining. Gradually, I watched Evan relax. I could see it clearly in his posture, in the way he stopped carefully choosing his words around me, stopped watching me quite so intently. One evening, standing in my kitchen while I pretended to search for tea bags I was actually holding in my hand, he spoke to Laura as if I wasn't even present in the room. We'll be able to handle everything soon, he said confidently. Another month, maybe 2 at most, and we can move forward with the formal competency hearing. Then all this hassle will be finished. I kept my face deliberately blank and confused looking, but my knitting basket sat on the counter nearby, recorder running silently beneath the cheerful yarn. Every single word was being saved, documented, preserved as evidence. Meanwhile, Thomas worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering official documentation and building our legal case. He met with the county recorder's office, meticulously compared signature samples, and pulled complete filing histories going back years. The evidence he uncovered was absolutely damning. Evan had filed altered documents at the county office exactly 3 months ago, presenting a property deed with clearly forged signatures. He'd used what appeared to be an old photocopy of my signature, probably lifted from a birthday card or similar document, and literally pasted it onto new paperwork. It's textbook fraud, Thomas explained, showing me the side-by-side comparison under his office's bright lights. Completely obvious once you know to look for it. The county recorder confirmed they never properly verified the signature, because Evan presented himself as acting legitimately on your behalf with power of attorney. Which he absolutely never had, I said. Which he absolutely never had. Thomas agreed with grim satisfaction. And now the county office is mortified they didn't catch this initially. They'll provide testimony in court if we need it, and they're cooperating fully with the investigation. The trap was slowly but surely tightening around Evan, and he remained completely oblivious. He thought he was the clever predator, but he'd actually wandered into an elaborate snare of his own making, constructed from his own lies and fraudulent actions. Thomas filed formal fraud complaints with both the county and the bank. Official investigations began. And through it all, I continued playing confused and harmless, quietly knitting in my chair while the slow but relentless machinery of justice ground steadily forward. Evan suddenly insisted on throwing me an elaborate birthday party. To show the whole community that you're still an important part of this family, he said, his smile not quite reaching his cold eyes. My 75th birthday arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear blue skies. Their house was filled with neighbors and Laura's various friends, people who'd known me for years, who'd watched me raise Laura, who remembered James. I wore my best navy dress and smiled graciously as people wished me well, and handed me wrapped gifts. Halfway through the dinner, as Evan stood up to make a toast about families taking care of their own in difficult times, I rose slowly from my seat. The room gradually quieted, all eyes turning curiously toward me. I'd like to make a toast as well, I said, my voice steady and surprisingly strong. I raised my glass and looked directly at Evan across the crowded room. To be honest, the one thing this house has been missing for far too long. The silence that followed was absolutely profound. Guests shifted very uncomfortably in their chairs. Laura's face went completely white. Evan's carefully practiced smile froze unnaturally on his face, his wine glass suspended awkwardly in midair. To truth finally coming to light, I continued clearly, no matter how long it's been deliberately hidden underwater. I drank from my glass, and slowly, very uncertainly, other guests raised their glasses. But the party never recovered its previously festive atmosphere. People began leaving early, making polite excuses, and I heard anxious whispers in the hallway as they gathered their coats and purses. The performance was over, and everyone sensed something was terribly wrong. Late that same night, long after the last guests had departed, Evan found me alone in the kitchen washing wine glasses. Laura had retreated upstairs with a migraine, and the house had finally fallen quiet. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, and his friendly mask had completely vanished. This was the real Evan, the one my daughter had somehow married without truly seeing. You think you're clever, don't you, Marion? I kept washing glasses, not looking at him directly. I think I know exactly what you threw in that lake. His jaw visibly clenched. You need to be very careful. You'll end up in a nursing home before this year is out. A nice, quiet place where confused old women can be properly supervised and kept safe from themselves. I dried my hands slowly on a dish towel, and turned to face him directly. His eyes were cold, calculating, completely devoid of warmth. This was the man who'd planned to steal everything from me. Maybe I will end up there, I said quietly. But at least I'll sleep every night with a completely clear conscience. Will you be able to say the same thing, Evan? He pushed off from the doorframe and took a deliberate step closer, looming over me in what I recognized as an intimidation tactic. For just a moment, I thought he might actually become physically threatening. But then he smiled instead, and it was sharp and cruel. You have absolutely no idea what's coming for you. Neither do you, I replied calmly. His smile faltered slightly before he turned and walked away. Thomas filed our formal legal inquiry on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, investigators from the County Fraud Division were sitting in Evan's office, asking very pointed questions. I wasn't physically there to witness it, but Laura called me shortly after, her voice high and panicked. Mom, they're freezing all of Evan's bank accounts. They're asking detailed questions about the cabin, about property papers, about signatures on documents. What's happening? Why didn't you tell me? The truth is happening, I said gently but firmly. Finally, after being buried for so long. The investigation moved with surprising speed once it officially began. The bank cooperated fully and eagerly, desperate to distance themselves from the fraudulent loan application. The county recorder's office provided detailed testimony about the altered deed. Patricia Freeman submitted her professional notes clearly showing I was mentally sound and completely capable. And I handed over every single recording I'd carefully made, every document from James's hidden drawer, Every piece of evidence Thomas and I had painstakingly compiled over weeks. Evan blustered and threatened, and made wild accusations. He hired an expensive lawyer who tried desperately to paint me as a vindictive old woman, confused and easily manipulated by others with their own agendas. But the evidence was simply overwhelming and undeniable. For the first time since I'd watched him throw that box into the lake, Evan looked genuinely scared. He sat in the county courthouse in his expensive suit that suddenly seemed too large for him, and watched helplessly as his carefully constructed lies systematically crumbled. I sat quietly in the gallery with my hands folded and watched justice slowly unfold. Laura started visiting me alone after the preliminary hearing. She'd arrive in the evenings, her face drawn and pale, sitting at my kitchen table exactly like she used to as a troubled teenager seeking advice. "I didn't know," she said one night, tears streaming down her face and dripping onto the table. "I swear to you, Mom, I genuinely thought the cabin really was supposed to be ours." Evan showed me official-looking papers, and I just believed him without question. I listened without judgment or interruption, letting her speak and purge her guilt. "He told me you were starting to forget things, that you were getting confused and needed protection from yourself. He made it sound like we were helping you, keeping you safe." Her voice broke completely. "I was trying to be a good daughter. I didn't think he'd go this far. I didn't know about the forgery, the loan, any of it." I reached across the worn table and took her trembling hand in mine. "It's not too late to remember who you really are, Laura. To remember what your father spent your whole childhood teaching you about integrity and honesty." She squeezed my hand tightly, sobbing openly now like a child. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Mom. I know you are, sweetheart. I know." But knowing someone was sorry and actually forgiving them were two completely different things. And I wasn't quite ready for forgiveness yet. Maybe eventually. Maybe someday. But definitely not today. The official county hearing lasted exactly 3 hours. I sat straight-backed in my chair at the plaintiff's table, answering every question clearly and precisely, my mind sharp and my memory perfect. Thomas presented our extensive evidence methodically and professionally. The recordings that proved Evan's deception, the documents from James's hidden drawer, the expert testimony about obviously forged signatures, Patricia Freeman's professional assessment of my complete mental competence. Evan's expensive lawyer tried valiantly to create reasonable doubt, suggesting I was confused or that this was all simply a tragic misunderstanding blown completely out of proportion by family drama. But when the judge asked me to speak directly about the events, I responded calmly and firmly. "Your Honor, my son-in-law deliberately attempted to steal my property through systematic fraud and forgery. He manipulated my daughter, forged legal documents, and actively tried to have me declared mentally incompetent to cover up his crimes. The evidence speaks clearly for itself." The judge reviewed all the materials spread before him on the bench, his expression growing progressively grimmer with each document he examined. Finally, he looked up and stared at Evan with barely concealed contempt. "Mr. Pierce, I find absolutely overwhelming evidence of fraud, deliberate forgery, and elder abuse. I'm restoring full and complete ownership of the Crescent Lake property to Mrs. Marion Clark, effective immediately. Additionally, I'm referring this entire case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution." The gavel fell with a sharp crack. Evan's face went completely ashen. Outside the courthouse afterward, Thomas squeezed my shoulder supportively. "You did it, Marion. You actually did it." I looked back at the imposing building. "No, Thomas. The truth did it. I just refused to let it stay buried at the bottom of that lake." The following week, moving trucks appeared at Evan and Laura's house. I deliberately didn't go to watch, but neighbors who did told me about it later over coffee and sympathy. Evan had stormed around shouting at the movers. They said, while Laura sat quietly and numbly on the front steps like she was in shock. He'd lost his consulting business when the bank fraud investigation expanded beyond just my case. Lost his professional reputation when word spread quickly through their entire social and business circles. Lost absolutely everything he'd tried so desperately to steal from me. One quiet afternoon, Laura appeared at my door with a single suitcase and red, swollen eyes. Her hands trembled visibly as she stood on my porch. "Can I please come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside wordlessly, and she entered the house where she'd grown up, where she'd been a happy child. We sat together in the kitchen where I'd taught her to bake cookies, and I made tea with steady hands while she stared at her own hands like they belonged to a stranger. "I'm leaving him," she said finally, the words coming out flat and emotionless. "I filed for divorce yesterday morning." I set a steaming cup before her carefully. "That must have taken real courage." "You wanted a new beginning," I said softly, pulling out one of her old sweaters I'd kept stored in the hall closet. "Now you have the opportunity for exactly that. What you choose to do with it is entirely up to you." She looked up at me with tears spilling over again. "Can you ever forgive me, Mom?" "Eventually," I said honestly, meeting her eyes. "But first, you have to learn to forgive yourself. That's actually the harder part." The town's reaction genuinely surprised me. People who'd been whispering about my supposedly failing memory at church now stopped me specifically to apologize. Helen Burns hugged me tightly in the grocery store produce section. Even Patricia Freeman, who'd quit working for Evan, became a regular visitor for afternoon tea. "You showed everyone what real strength looks like," Helen told me earnestly one Sunday after church services. "Standing up for yourself when literally everyone thought you were too old, too confused, too weak to fight back." I smiled faintly at the compliment. Sometimes it just takes time for the truth to swim back up to the surface where people can see it clearly. The story spread far beyond our small town's boundaries. A regional newspaper ran a detailed article about elder fraud and financial abuse, using my case as a primary example. Other families started coming forward with disturbingly similar stories of manipulation and theft by trusted relatives. Thomas told me later that I'd inadvertently started something much bigger than just my own personal justice. "You gave other people the courage they needed to fight back against their own abusers." I hadn't set out to become any kind of symbol or advocate. I'd simply wanted to keep what was rightfully mine and honor James's memory properly. But if my stubborn refusal to be victimized helped others find their own strength, I suppose that made it all worthwhile. 3 months after the hearing concluded, Evan appeared at my front door on a cold, rainy November evening. He looked absolutely terrible, gaunt, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled jacket that had clearly seen much better days. "Marion," he said, his voice rough and broken. "Please, you have to listen. You completely ruined me." I stood in the doorway without inviting him inside. Rain dripped steadily from his unwashed hair, forming small puddles at his feet on my porch. I lost absolutely everything. My business, my reputation, my marriage, my career. I can't get work anywhere in this state. I've been completely blacklisted in my industry. I looked at this man who'd tried to steal my entire life away, who'd manipulated my daughter and forged my dead husband's documents without a shred of remorse. I felt no satisfaction in witnessing his suffering, but I felt absolutely no guilt either. "No, Evan," I said quietly but firmly. "You did that entirely to yourself. Every single choice, every calculated lie, every document you deliberately forged, those were all your own decisions. I simply refused to let you profit from committing crimes against me. I have nothing left," he said desperately, his voice cracking. "I'm literally sleeping in my car most nights." "Then now you know exactly how it feels to have everything taken from you," I replied. "That's precisely what you tried to do to me. You tried to steal my home, my independence, my dignity, my late husband's legacy. He stared at me through the rain running down his face. It might have been tears mixed in, might have been just water. I couldn't tell, and frankly didn't care anymore. "Don't ever come back here again," I said, and closed the door firmly. Laura stayed with me for the next 6 months while her divorce proceedings slowly worked through the legal system. We learned to live together again, mother and daughter, carefully navigating the damaged trust that lay broken between us like shattered glass. She found a job at the town library, started attending weekly therapy sessions, and began the long process of rebuilding her life on honest foundations instead of Evan's lies. Some evenings, we'd sit together on the porch and talk about everything: her father, her failed marriage, her profound regrets and hard-learned lessons. "I still don't understand how I completely missed what Evan was doing," she said one warm night, fireflies dancing in the darkening yard beyond us. "Love makes us willfully blind sometimes," I replied, watching the lights blink on and off. "You desperately wanted to believe in him, in your marriage, in the future you'd planned together. That's not a weakness, Laura. That's just being human. But you saw through him eventually." I shook my head slowly. "Not at first, honey. Not immediately. I saw him throw that box in the lake, and even then, part of me wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. We only see what we're emotionally ready to see." She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to as a small child. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything I put you through." "I know you are, sweetheart. And I'm slowly learning to let it go, to forgive." It wasn't complete forgiveness yet, not entirely. Trust took considerable time to rebuild properly, like a badly broken bone that had to heal slowly and carefully. But we were genuinely trying, working at it every day. That had to count for something meaningful. Exactly 1 year after that fateful night by the lake, I stood on the old dock at dawn with a single white lily held carefully in my hands. Morning mist curled softly across the water's calm surface, transforming the familiar landscape into something ethereal and dreamlike. The cabin behind me had been lovingly repaired and updated, not for selling, but for living and remembering. For my grandchildren to visit during summers. For Laura and I to spend peaceful weekends. For keeping James's memory vibrantly alive in the place he'd loved most in this world. I looked down at the dark water where Evan had thrown that box, genuinely believing he was drowning incriminating evidence forever. But water doesn't keep secrets buried. It eventually returns what doesn't belong in its depths, pushes truth back up to the surface where it can finally be seen clearly. I tossed the lily gently onto the water and watched it float, stark white against the dark surface. For the lies that sank, I whispered to the morning air, and the truth that rose back up. The flower drifted slowly toward shore, caught by invisible currents beneath the surface. Behind me, I heard Laura's familiar footsteps on the wooden dock. She came and stood quietly beside me, and together we watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "My name is Marion Clark. I'm 75 years old now, and I know exactly what family truly means. Not blind loyalty or convenient lies, but love that's strong enough to demand truth and forgiveness that must be earned through genuine change and time." The lake was perfectly calm now, clean, ready for new memories to be made. And so was I.